Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories, here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Zara Blackwood and I am 26 years old. I've been a park ranger at Olympic National Park for 8 months. This happened during the fall of 2000, when the missing person case of Iris Caldwell turned into something that still haunts me. I was still new to the job, only 8 months in, when Ranger Supervisor Dale Henricks called me into his office that October morning. The autumn mist hung thick between the Douglas firs outside his window, and I could taste the metallic dampness in the air, even through the closed door of the ranger station. "Blackwood, we've got a missing person," Dale said, sliding a file across his desk. His weathered hands bore the scars of 23 years in these woods. Iris Caldwell, 34, botanical photographer. She was documenting rare autumn fungi for some nature magazine. Last radio check-in was 3 days ago from the Quinault sector. I opened the file, studying the woman's photograph. Auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, intelligent green eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of determined expression that suggested she wouldn't give up easily on anything. Her equipment list was extensive: professional camera gear, camping supplies for a week, GPS unit, emergency beacon. "Solo expedition?" I asked, trying to keep the eagerness out of my voice. This could be my chance to prove I belonged here, to show I was more than just the rookie who'd graduated from the academy with perfect test scores, but no real experience. "Against our recommendations, yes. She's got permits for backcountry camping in sections 4 through 7. Dale tapped the map with a thick finger. "Weather's been clear, no storms reported. Her vehicle's still at the Quinault trailhead. This should be straightforward. Follow her planned route, look for signs." The metallic taste of anticipation filled my mouth as I studied her projected path. 3 days meant she could be injured, lost, or worse. My textbook training kicked in: establish timeline, follow last known position, check water sources and shelters. "I'll take the ATV to the trailhead, start tracking from there," I said, already mentally cataloging the equipment I'd need. "Take the radio, check in every 2 hours. And Blackwood?" Dale's eyes held a warning I should have heeded. "Don't try to be a hero. You find anything concerning, you call for backup immediately." The drive to Quinault took 40 minutes through increasingly dense forest. By 2 p.m., the autumn sun was already losing its strength, casting long shadows between the moss-draped trees. I parked next to Iris Caldwell's silver Honda Civic and began my inspection. No signs of forced entry, no blood, nothing obviously wrong. Her gear was gone, suggesting she'd left on her own. The trailhead register showed her signature from 4 days ago, her handwriting neat and confident. "I. Caldwell, Botanical Photography Expedition, Sections 4-7, returning Oct. 15th. Today was October 18th. I shouldered my pack: GPS, first aid kit, emergency supplies, flare gun, and my service radio, and started up the trail. The path was well maintained for the first mile, but as I moved deeper into the wilderness, it became little more than deer tracks threading between massive tree trunks. The silence was wrong. I'd been in these woods dozens of times during training, and there was always sound: birds, squirrels, the distant crack of branches. But here, 2 miles in, there was nothing but my own breathing and the soft squelch of mud under my boots. I keyed the radio. "Base, this is Ranger Blackwood checking in from mile marker 2 on the Quinault Trail. No visual contact yet, continuing search pattern Alpha." Static answered me. Then Dale's voice, distant and crackling. "Copy that, Blackwood. Weather's moving in from the west, might affect radio contact later. Stay sharp." At mile 3, I found the first sign: a piece of red fabric caught on a blackberry bush about chest high. I bagged it carefully, noting the GPS coordinates. Red wasn't on Iris's equipment list, but it could be from an undershirt or bandana. The fabric was fresh, not weathered. The trail split ahead. According to my map, the left fork led to Beaver Creek, a logical water source, The right fork climbed toward the old growth section where rare fungi might grow. I studied the ground, looking for boot prints, broken vegetation, any sign of passage. There, a partial boot print in the soft earth, pointing toward the right fork. Size looked about right for a woman. I marked it with a small flag and continued up the climbing path. The temperature was dropping as the sun disappeared behind the canopy. My breath came in small white puffs and I pulled my jacket tighter. The cold seemed to penetrate right through the fabric, settling into my bones. At 4 p.m., I found Iris Caldwell's camp. The blue dome tent was still standing in a small clearing, but something was immediately wrong. The camp was too neat, too undisturbed. No scattered gear, no signs of hurried packing. The tent flap hung open, and when I approached with my flashlight, I could smell it. Fear, cold sweat, and human terror soaked into the nylon. "Hello," I called out, my voice seeming to die just feet from my mouth. "Iris Caldwell? This is the Park Service." Nothing. I examined the tent carefully. Sleeping bag still laid out, personal items arranged as if she'd just stepped out for a moment. Camera equipment was missing, but her backup clothing remained folded in a corner. No signs of struggle, no blood. But on the tent floor, barely visible, were drag marks in the dirt. My radio crackled. "Blackwood, this is base. Weather front moving faster than expected. You need to wrap up and head back." "Dale, I found her camp. She's not here, but there are signs of something. Drag marks leading away from the tent site." Static filled the silence for long seconds. What kind of drag marks? I knelt down, playing my flashlight over the disturbed earth. "Looks like someone was pulled out of the tent. No blood visible, but the pattern suggests she wasn't walking on her own." "Christ. Okay, mark the location and get back here. We'll organize a proper search team for first light." "I can follow the trail while there's still..." "Negative, Blackwood. You're a rookie, not a one-person search and rescue team. Return to base. That's an order." I stared at the drag marks leading away into the darkening forest. Every instinct screamed that time was critical, that if Iris was out there injured or worse, every hour could matter. But Dale was right. I was inexperienced, and stumbling around in the dark wouldn't help anyone. "Copy that. Heading back now." I packed up quickly, marking the GPS coordinates and taking photos of the tent and drag marks. As I prepared to leave, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The drag marks didn't lead toward the trail or any logical route. They led directly into the thickest part of the forest, where no sane person would go voluntarily, especially not in the dark. The hike back should have taken 90 minutes. It took me 3 hours. Twice I lost the trail completely, my flashlight beam seeming to die just yards ahead of me. The darkness felt alive, pressing in from all sides. Every sound made me jump. The crack of a branch, the rustle of leaves, what might have been footsteps matching my own pace. At one point I stopped and called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" My voice echoed strangely, as if the forest was mocking me. Then, impossibly, I heard what sounded like my own voice calling back from somewhere ahead. "Hello? Is someone there?" I ran the last mile to the trailhead, my heart hammering against my ribs. By the time I reached my vehicle, I was soaked in cold sweat despite the freezing temperature. The drive back to the ranger station passed in a blur. Dale was waiting for me when I stumbled through the door at nearly 10 p.m. "Jesus, Blackwood, you look like you've seen a ghost. What happened out there?" I gave him my report, trying to sound professional despite the way my hands shook as I filled out the paperwork. He listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on his pad. "We'll have a full team out there at dawn," he said finally. "Search and rescue, maybe bring in a dog team if needed. You did good work today, but I want you to stay here tomorrow, coordinate communications." "Sir, I'd like to be part of the search team. I know where..." "You found her camp, Blackwood. That's excellent work for a rookie. But tomorrow we need experienced trackers, not someone who's going to get lost in the dark." His tone softened slightly. "Get some rest. This is going to be a long operation." I wanted to argue, but exhaustion was hitting me like a physical weight. I drove home to my small apartment in Port Angeles, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those drag marks leading into the forest, heard my own voice calling back from the darkness. At 3 a.m., my landline rang. Blackwood. My voice was hoarse from lack of sleep. Zara, it's Dale. We've got a problem. I sat up, instantly alert. What kind of problem? Communication breakdown. All our radio equipment started malfunctioning about an hour ago. Can't raise any of the remote stations. Can't get through to the county sheriff. It's like something's jamming all our frequencies. Ice formed in my stomach. That's not possible. Equipment doesn't just fail like that. I know, but there's more. Got a call from a trucker on Highway 101. Says he saw someone matching Iris Caldwell's description walking along the shoulder around midnight, about 10 miles from the park boundary. Walking? On her own? That's what he said. But here's the thing. When he stopped to offer help, she ran into the woods. Wouldn't respond when he called out. I was already reaching for my clothes. I'm coming in. Negative. I need you to stay put until we can figure out what's happening with communications. Could be equipment failure, could be weather interference, but until we know... The line went dead. I tried calling back but got only a busy signal. My cell phone showed no signal, which wasn't unusual in this area, but the timing felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. By 5 a.m., I couldn't stand it anymore. I dressed in full gear and drove back toward the park, my headlights cutting through pre-dawn darkness. The ranger station was empty when I arrived. Dale's truck gone from the parking lot. I tried the radio equipment myself, cycling through all frequencies. Nothing but static on every channel. There was a note on Dale's desk. Blackwood, gone to coordinate with county. Maintain radio watch. Do not attempt solo search. DH. But something about the handwriting looked off. The letters were too careful, too precise, not Dale's usual hurried scrawl. As the sun rose, painting the forest in shades of gold and red, I made a decision that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I was going back out there. This time I brought everything. Emergency supplies, flare gun, backup radio, even my personal GPS unit. I told myself I was just going to check on the camp, maybe expand the search radius slightly. I wasn't trying to be a hero. The hike to Iris's camp took less time in daylight, but the silence was still oppressive. No birds, no small animal sounds, just the whisper of wind through dying leaves. The cold seemed to follow me, a penetrating chill that my jacket couldn't keep out. The camp looked exactly as I'd left it the night before, but something was different. It took me several minutes to realize what. The drag marks were gone. I knelt where they'd been, running my hands over ground that was now perfectly smooth, as if someone had carefully raked away all evidence. But I had photos on my digital camera, proof that I hadn't imagined it. When I checked the camera, the photos were gone. Every single image from yesterday had been erased. My hands were shaking as I examined the tent more carefully. Inside, I found something that made my blood freeze. A Park Service radio, tuned to our emergency frequency. It was Dale's radio. I recognized the scratches on the case, the faded sticker with his badge number. But Dale should have been coordinating with the county sheriff. Why was his radio here? I keyed the mic. Base, this is Blackwood. I'm at the missing persons campsite and I've found Ranger Henriks's radio equipment. Please respond. Static filled the air. Then, impossibly, Dale's voice came through clear as crystal. Zara, where are you? We've been looking everywhere. You need to come back to base immediately. Dale, how are you transmitting? Your radio's here at the campsite. A pause. Then, I'm using backup equipment. There's been a development in the case. Return to base now. Something in his tone was wrong. Dale never called me by my first name over official channels, and there was a quality to his voice. Too smooth, too controlled. What kind of development? We found Iris Caldwell. She's been hurt. We need you back here to help with the report. My heart rate spiked. Is she alive? Do you need me to call for medical evacuation? Just return to base, Zara. Everything's under control. I stared at the radio in my hands, realization dawning like a cold sunrise. The voice was Dale's, but the speech patterns were wrong. The phrasing was off. And most importantly, Dale would never tell me everything was under control if we'd just found an injured hiker. Someone was using Dale's voice, but it wasn't Dale. I switched off the radio and tried my backup unit. Dead silence on all frequencies. Whatever was happening, I was completely cut off from the outside world. The smart thing would have been to hike back immediately, get to my vehicle and drive to the nearest town for help. But as I stood there in that unnaturally silent forest, I realized something that made my stomach clench with terror. I wasn't just searching for Iris Caldwell anymore. I was being hunted. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Someone had been watching me, manipulating the situation from the beginning. The erased photos, the missing drag marks, Dale's radio appearing at the camp. None of it was accidental. I forced myself to think like the ranger I'd trained to be. What did I know for certain? Iris Caldwell was missing. Her camp showed signs that she'd been taken against her will. Dale was supposed to be coordinating with county officials, but his radio was here. Someone was using sophisticated equipment to monitor and interfere with communications, and that someone knew enough about Park Service procedures to mimic Dale's voice convincingly. A former ranger, someone with inside knowledge. I checked my GPS unit to confirm my location, then started following what I thought might be Iris's trail. Without the drag marks, I had to rely on other signs. Broken branches, disturbed undergrowth, anything that might indicate passage. 50 yards from the camp, I found a digital camera. It was expensive equipment, professional grade. The LCD screen was cracked, but when I powered it on, I could see the last few photos Iris had taken. Mushrooms and fungi just as expected, but the final image made me gasp. A man in ranger uniform, photographed from a distance through the trees. The figure was too far away to make out facial features, but something about his posture was familiar. He was watching Iris's camp from concealment. I forwarded through the images. The next photo showed the same figure, closer now, and I could see he was carrying equipment that wasn't standard issue. Some kind of electronic device, military-looking. The timestamp on the photos was from 3 days ago, the day Iris was supposed to have gone missing. My radio crackled again. This time the voice was different, higher-pitched, terrified. "Please, is anyone there? I'm lost, I'm hurt, please help me." It was a woman's voice. It could have been Iris. "This is Park Ranger Blackwood. What's your location? Are you injured?" "I don't know where I am. It's so dark and I can hear him coming. Please, you have to help me." "Who's coming? What's your name?" "Iris. Iris Caldwell. He took my equipment, destroyed my GPS. I've been hiding for days, but I think he knows where I am." The voice cut off, replaced by static. I stared at the radio, my mind racing. If that was really Iris, she was alive, but in immediate danger. But something felt wrong about the transmission. The voice was too clear, too precise for someone who'd been hiding in the wilderness for days. I keyed the mic. "Iris, if you can hear me, I need you to tell me something specific about your research. What type of fungi were you documenting?" Silence, then. What does that matter? Please just help me." The real Iris Caldwell, based on her files, was a specialist in mycology. She would have been excited to talk about her research even in a crisis situation. This person had no idea what Iris was studying. I was talking to the predator. The realization sent ice water through my veins. Not only was someone hunting in these woods, but they were sophisticated enough to monitor radio frequencies, sophisticated enough to lure rescue personnel into traps. I switched off my radio and tried to think. Every procedure I'd been taught assumed we were dealing with natural dangers, injury, exposure, getting lost. Nothing in my training covered a human predator who understood our protocols better than we did. I needed to get out of the forest and bring back real help. But as I turned to head back toward the trail, I found my path blocked. A man in a Park Service uniform stood between me and the way out. At first glance, he looked like any other ranger. Regulation clothing, proper equipment, confident posture. But something in his eyes made my skin crawl. "Ranger Blackwood," he said, his voice pleasant and professional. "I've been looking for you." I kept my hand near my radio, though I knew it wouldn't help. I don't believe we've met. I'm conducting a search for the missing hiker. Oh, I know exactly what you're doing. He stepped closer, and I could see details that made my throat tighten. His uniform was perfect, too perfect. No mud, no wear marks, as if he'd just put it on for a performance. I'm Ranger Coleman, recently transferred from Glacier National Park. Your supervisor sent me to assist with the search. There was no Ranger Coleman. I'd memorized the names of every person assigned to Olympic National Park. That's great, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We should coordinate our search patterns. Have you found any sign of Miss Caldwell? His smile was cold and knowing. Oh yes, I've found her. In fact, she's been very helpful in setting up this little exercise. Exercise? Training, you might say. You see, Zara, may I call you Zara? You represent everything wrong with the modern Park Service. Young, inexperienced, overconfident. You think your academy training makes you ready for anything these woods can throw at you? I took a step backward, measuring the distance to the nearest tree line. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I need to report back to my supervisor. Your supervisor is indisposed at the moment. Don't worry, he's not dead yet. That depends entirely on how well you perform in the next few hours. The casual way he mentioned Dale's fate made my blood turn to ice. What do you want? I want to show you what it means to be truly hunted. You see, I spent 15 years as a ranger in parks across the country. I know every protocol, every procedure, every trick you might try. And I've learned that the most dangerous animal in any wilderness isn't a bear or a wolf. He gestured around us at the silent forest. It's humans. Specifically, humans who understand that these vast, wild spaces are perfect hunting grounds for those with the right inclinations. You're sick, I whispered. I'm evolved. For years, I watched incompetent rangers like you stumble through these woods, completely unaware of the real predators around them. Do you know how easy it would be to make people disappear out here? How simple it is to manipulate search and rescue operations? He held up a device that looked like military communications equipment. Frequency jammers, voice modulators, GPS scramblers. Amazing what you can buy with a government pension. I've been watching you since yesterday, Zara. Every move, every decision. You've performed exactly as expected. Where's Iris Caldwell? Safe for now. She makes excellent bait. You see, she served her purpose, drawing you out here, away from backup and support. But her real value is as motivation for what comes next. He checked what looked like a military-style watch. I'm giving you a 30-minute head start. If you can evade me until dawn, that's about 8 hours from now, I'll let both you and Miss Caldwell go free. If I catch you, he didn't need to finish the threat. This is insane. I'm a federal employee. People will come looking. Will they? Your radio communications have been compromised. Your supervisor thinks you're safely coordinating from the office. The county sheriff thinks everything's under control. And you've already demonstrated a tendency to go off on your own against direct orders. He was right, and we both knew it. I'd played directly into his hands by returning to the woods alone. 30 minutes start, now. I ran. Behind me, I could hear him laughing. Not the maniacal cackle of a movie villain, but the satisfied chuckle of someone whose plans were working perfectly. I crashed through underbrush, my ranger training warring with pure terror. Part of my mind was cataloging details, terrain, potential shelter, water sources. But most of my consciousness was consumed by the primal need to escape. After 10 minutes of hard running, I forced myself to stop and think strategically. Panic would get me killed. I needed to use what I knew about these woods and about search and rescue procedures. But immediately, I realized the problem. He knew everything I knew, and more. Standard evasion techniques would be useless against someone with ranger training. He'd anticipate my moves, know where I'd likely go for shelter or concealment. My only advantage was that I was younger, possibly faster and desperate. I checked my equipment. GPS unit, probably being jammed, but worth trying. Flashlight, essential, but would also make me visible. Emergency whistle, useless if no one was around to hear it. Flare gun, one shot, and it would announce my location to everyone in the area. The flare gun gave me an idea. I moved as quietly as possible toward higher ground. where a flare would be visible from the greatest distance. If there were any real search teams out there, any hikers or hunters, a distress flare might bring help. But as I climbed, I realized he was already tracking me. Small sounds in the darkness behind me, moving with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where I was going. At a rocky outcrop that offered a view of the surrounding forest, I prepared the flare gun. Below me, I could see a light moving through the trees, his flashlight, making no attempt at concealment. He wasn't worried about staying hidden because he didn't need to be. I fired the flare. The red star burst above the canopy, casting everything in hellish crimson light. For a few seconds, the entire landscape was visible, miles of unbroken forest in every direction, and no signs of any other human presence. Beautiful shot. His voice carried clearly through the night air. But I'm afraid the nearest road is 15 miles away, and I've been monitoring emergency frequencies all evening. No one else is coming, Zara. I could see him now, still moving steadily in my direction. The flare had given away my position without bringing any help. I needed a new plan. Moving as quietly as possible, I started working my way around the ridge, hoping to circle behind him. If I could reach his base of operations, wherever that was, maybe I could find Iris or Dale or some way to call for real help. But after 20 minutes of careful movement, I realized I was being herded. Every time I tried to change direction, I'd encounter some obstacle. A cliff face too steep to climb, a bog too dangerous to cross, terrain too thick to navigate quickly. He was using his knowledge of the landscape to funnel me towards some predetermined location. My radio crackled. His voice again, but this time without the pretense of being Dale or Iris. "You're doing better than I expected, Zara. Most people panic completely by this point. You're actually thinking, which makes this more interesting." I didn't respond, but kept moving through the darkness. "I know you're listening. Here's what you need to understand. This isn't random. I've been planning this specific scenario for months. You think you're improvising, but you're actually following a script I wrote." Despite myself, I keyed the radio. "What do you want?" "Why me?" "Because you represent everything I hate about the modern Park Service. Young, inexperienced, full of textbook knowledge, but no real understanding of what it means to face genuine danger. Your supervisor spoke very highly of your test scores." My blood chilled. "You know Dale personally." "We've met. In fact, he's been quite informative about your training, your strengths and weaknesses. Did you know he was worried about your tendency to take unnecessary risks? About your need to prove yourself?" I realized with growing horror that this predator had been studying me specifically, learning my psychology, my patterns. "Where is he?" "Closer than you think. In fact, you'll be seeing him soon. I've prepared a little reunion." The radio went silent. I was now deeper in the forest than I'd ever been, following what might have been an old animal trail through terrain that seemed increasingly alien. The trees here were ancient, massive trunks that blocked most of the moonlight. The air smelled of decay and something else, something organic and wrong. Then I smelled smoke. Following the scent, I came to a clearing where a small campfire burned next to what looked like a professional campsite, military-style tent, organized equipment, everything laid out with precision. And tied to a tree at the edge of the firelight was Dale Henricks. He was alive but unconscious, rope restraints keeping him upright against the trunk. There was dried blood on his forehead, but he seemed to be breathing normally. "Dale," I whispered, approaching carefully. "Dale, wake up." His eyes opened, unfocused at first, then widening when he saw me. "Zara? Jesus Christ, what are you doing here? You need to run, right now. I'm getting you out of here." I started working at the ropes, but they were professionally tied, impossible to untie quickly without cutting. "Listen to me," Dale said urgently. "This guy, he's not just some psychopath. He's military trained, maybe special forces. He knows things about park operations that are classified. I think he might be former ranger," I finished. "He told me." "No, that's what he wants us to think. I saw his equipment. That's not surplus gear, Zara. That's current military issue. I think he might still be active duty, some kind of black ops. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If Dale was right, we weren't dealing with a rogue ex-employee. We were dealing with someone who had resources, training, and possibly official backing for his activities. "We need to get out of here," I said, still working at the ropes. "Behind you," Dale whispered. I spun around to find the predator standing at the edge of the clearing, no longer bothering with any pretense. He'd removed the Park Service uniform, revealing military fatigues underneath. "I was wondering when you'd find my base camp," he said conversationally. "Right on schedule." "What do you want?" I demanded, putting myself between him and Dale. "What I want is to demonstrate the vulnerability of our national park system to domestic terrorism. What I want is to show how easy it is for trained operatives to use these wilderness areas as hunting grounds. What I want is data on how civilian personnel respond under extreme stress." He gestured around the clearing. "This entire operation has been a field test, Zara. You and your supervisor are test subjects in a psychological warfare study." "That's impossible. The government does whatever it believes is necessary for national security. There are programs you can't imagine, studies that would horrify you, and sometimes those studies require live subjects." I looked at Dale, who was staring at the man with growing recognition and horror. "You know him," I realized. Dale's voice was barely a whisper. "Colonel Marcus Webb. I thought you were dead. Afghanistan, wasn't it? That helicopter crash?" Webb smiled. "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. I've been reassigned to domestic operations, specifically testing the security vulnerabilities of our national infrastructure." "Parks aren't infrastructure," I said. "Aren't they? Millions of visitors every year, minimal security, vast areas that are impossible to patrol effectively. They're perfect targets for anyone who wants to cause maximum psychological impact with minimal resources." He moved closer, and I could see the clinical coldness in his eyes. "What we're testing here is how easy it is for a single operative to take control of an entire sector of park operations, to manipulate communications, eliminate key personnel, and create a crisis that could tie up law enforcement resources for weeks." "And Iris Caldwell?" "A convenient prop. She really is a botanical photographer, and she really did come here to document fungi. But she's also been working with my team for the past 6 months, gathering intelligence on park security procedures." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Everything had been orchestrated from the beginning. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now we see how long you can survive against a professional. The data we've gathered so far has been excellent, but we need to push the experiment to its conclusion." He checked his watch again. "You have until dawn to reach the park boundary. If you succeed, you'll be debriefed and released. If you fail, you'll kill us. I'll complete the mission. Nothing personal, Ranger Blackwood. You've actually performed better than our psychological profiles predicted. Under different circumstances, you might have made a decent operative yourself." He started to turn away, then paused. "Oh, and just so we're clear, your supervisor will be released regardless of your performance. He's not part of the test parameters." "But I am. You are the test." With that, he disappeared into the darkness, leaving me alone with Dale, and the growing realization that I was trapped in a nightmare that was sanctioned by my own government. Dale was looking at me with desperate intensity. "Zara, listen carefully. Whatever they told you about this being a test, whatever they promised about letting you go, it's a lie. Webb was cashiered from the Army for unauthorized human experimentation. He's not working for anyone but himself." "How do you know?" "Because I helped investigate him 3 years ago. He was running illegal psychological warfare experiments on Afghan civilians. The only reason he wasn't court-martialed was because his work was classified and the victims were foreign nationals." The implications settled over me like ice water. He's going to kill all of us, isn't he? He's going to try. But we have one advantage he doesn't know about. Dale managed a grim smile despite his restraints. I activated the emergency beacon in my truck before he took me. It's broadcasting on a frequency he can't jam. Help is coming, but not until morning. That's still hours away. Then we better make sure we're alive when they get here. I finally managed to work Dale's restraints loose, my fingers cramping from the effort. He stood unsteadily, blood circulation returning to his hands. "What's the plan?" I asked. "Survival. Webb is good, but he's also arrogant. He thinks he's controlling all the variables, but he doesn't know these specific woods as well as we do. And he's assuming we'll act like panicked civilians." Dale picked up a sturdy branch, testing its weight. Time to show him what real rangers are capable of. We moved away from the campfire, using the darkness as cover. But we'd barely gone 50 yards when Webb's voice echoed through the forest. "I'm disappointed, Ranger Henricks. Helping your subordinate escape wasn't part of the test parameters." A rifle shot cracked through the night, the bullet splintering bark just inches from Dale's head. "Run!" he hissed. We ran. Behind us, I could hear Webb moving with professional efficiency. No wasted motion. No hurried breathing. He was hunting us the way a wolf hunts deer. Patiently, confidently, knowing that exhaustion would eventually make us vulnerable. For the next 2 hours, we played a deadly game of cat and mouse through the dark forest. Webb had night vision equipment and superior training, but we had desperation and knowledge of the local terrain. Twice, we managed to evade him by using Park Service emergency shelters that weren't on any public maps. Once, Dale created a diversion by triggering a small rock slide while I circled around to flank our pursuer. But Webb was learning our tactics, adapting his approach. And we were getting tired while he seemed to have limitless endurance. At around 3 a.m., we made a mistake. Trying to cross a stream in the darkness, I slipped on wet rocks and went down hard, my ankle twisting under me. The pain was immediate and intense. "I can't walk," I gasped. Dale helped me to cover behind a fallen log. "How bad?" I tried to put weight on the ankle and nearly passed out. Bad, really bad. We both knew what this meant. Webb would track us to this location within minutes, and I couldn't run anymore. "Leave me," I whispered. "Get to the boundary, bring back help." "Not happening." Dale checked his watch. 3 more hours until dawn. Think you can hold out that long?" Before I could answer, Webb's voice came from the darkness unnaturally close. "I can hear you whispering. Injury changes everything, doesn't it? Now we get to see how civilian personnel perform under real pressure." A flashlight beam swept across our hiding spot, missing us by inches. Dale pressed his finger to his lips, then pointed toward a thick grove of trees about 20 yards away. If we could reach it without being seen, we might have better cover. But moving with my injured ankle would be nearly impossible without making noise. "I know you're close," Webb continued, his voice maddeningly calm. "The beauty of this exercise is that it demonstrates how quickly a tactical situation can deteriorate. One injury, one moment of carelessness, and suddenly all your training becomes useless." Another flashlight sweep, this one closer. I could smell him now. Gun oil and military soap, the scent of professional violence. Dale made a decision. He picked up a rock and hurled it away from our position, into the underbrush 30 yards to our left. The crash it made was loud in the night silence. Webb's light swung toward the sound immediately. "Amateur hour," he muttered, but he moved in that direction. Dale helped me up, supporting most of my weight as we struggled toward the tree grove. Every step sent fire through my ankle, but I bit down on any sound that might give us away. We'd almost reached cover when my radio crackled to life. I'd forgotten I was still carrying it, and Webb's voice came through loud and clear. "By the way, Ranger Blackwood, I thought you might like to know that Miss Caldwell sends her regards." The transmission was followed by a woman's scream. High, terrified, and definitely real. "That was live audio," Webb's voice continued. "She's about half a mile from your current position. If you want to save her, you'll need to make a choice. Continue hiding like a coward or come find me." Dale and I looked at each other in the darkness. We both knew it was a trap, but we also knew that if there was any chance Iris was really in danger. "It's what he wants," Dale whispered. "He's manipulating us." Another scream came through the radio, longer this time, filled with agony. "Maybe," I said, "but what if she's really hurt? Then we call for backup and—" "With what? He's jammed everything. Dale, if there's even a chance she's alive." I could see the conflict in his eyes. Every instinct told us this was a trap, but every moral obligation demanded we try to help an innocent victim. The screaming stopped, replaced by Webb's voice. Timer starts now. You have 15 minutes to reach her location before I begin the final phase of my experiment. I'll be broadcasting her GPS coordinates in 1 minute. True to his word, coordinates appeared on my GPS unit 60 seconds later. The location was deeper in the forest, in terrain that would be difficult to navigate even in daylight. "We can't," Dale said. "Zara, this is exactly what he wants. He's using our own training against us, the imperative to rescue civilians, and if we don't go, he kills her anyway." Dale stared at the GPS coordinates, his jaw working. "Fuck it, but we do this smart. You stay here, call for help if anyone responds on the radio. I'll go." "I'm not staying behind. You can barely walk." "I can walk well enough, and you need backup, even if it's just a rookie with a sprained ankle." We both knew there was no real choice. Whatever Webb had planned, we were going to walk into it because that's what Rangers do. We protect people, even when it's stupid, even when it's obviously a trap. The journey to Iris's coordinates took 40 minutes through increasingly treacherous terrain. My ankle was screaming by the time we arrived, but adrenaline was keeping me functional. The GPS led us to another clearing, this one dominated by what looked like an old hunting cabin. Light flickered in the windows and I could hear sounds from inside. Movement, possibly voices. "This keeps getting better," Dale muttered. We approached carefully, using the tree line for cover. Through a dirty window I could see the interior, a single room with a table, some chairs, and a figure tied to a chair in the center. It was Iris Caldwell, and she was definitely not part of Webb's team. Her face was bruised, her clothes torn, and she was struggling against restraints that were clearly not theatrical props. Whatever game Webb was playing, Iris was an unwilling victim. "Real or fake?" Dale whispered. "Real. Look at her injuries. Those aren't makeup effects. Could still be a trap." "Of course it's a trap, but she's really hurt." We circled the cabin, looking for signs of Webb's presence. No other lights, no movement in the shadows. Either he was very well hidden, or he'd left Iris here as bait and positioned himself somewhere else. "Front door or window?" Dale asked. "Window. Less predictable." Dale found a window on the side of the cabin that was partially open. He worked it wider while I kept watch, every shadow seeming to hide a potential threat. "Iris?" Dale called softly through the window. "Can you hear me?" Her head snapped up, eyes wide with terror and hope. "Please," she whispered. "He said he was coming back. He said terrible things." "We're park rangers," I said, climbing awkwardly through the window with Dale's help. "We're going to get you out of here." Up close, I could see that her injuries were severe. Cuts on her face and arms, rope burns on her wrists, signs of prolonged captivity and abuse. "How long have you been here?" Dale asked, working on her restraints. "I don't know. Days. He kept asking me questions about park procedures, about ranger training. When I couldn't answer, She started crying, her whole body shaking. "It's okay," I said, though we all knew it wasn't. "You're safe now." "No," she whispered. "You don't understand. This isn't random. He knows things about both of you, personal things. He's been watching you for weeks." Ice formed in my stomach. "What kind of things?" "Your names, your schedules, your training records. He has files on both of you. And others." "Others?" "Rangers from other parks. He said you were all part of some kind of study." Dale and I exchanged glances. If Webb was targeting multiple rangers across different parks, this was bigger than just one rogue operative. "We need to get out of here," Dale said, finally freeing Iris from the chair. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though she was clearly weak from her ordeal. We helped her to the window, but as Dale started to climb out first, the front door of the cabin exploded inward. Webb stood in the doorway, no longer pretending to be anything but a predator. He was carrying military-grade weapons and wearing full tactical gear. "Excellent response time," he said conversationally. 37 minutes from initial distress call to rescue attempt. well within normal parameters. Let her go, Dale said. Your quarrel is with the Park Service, not with civilians. But that's where you're wrong, Ranger Henricks. Miss Caldwell isn't a civilian. She's been working with my research team for the past 6 months, gathering intelligence on park security procedures. He gestured with his rifle. Show them, Iris. To my horror, Iris straightened up, her injured and terrified demeanor disappearing like a mask being removed. The cuts on her face were real, but her fear had been an act. I'm sorry, she said, not sounding sorry at all. But the data we're collecting is too important. You're working with him, I said, the betrayal hitting me like a physical blow. I'm working for the future security of our national parks, she replied. Colonel Webb has demonstrated that current ranger protocols are completely inadequate for dealing with sophisticated threats. Webb nodded approvingly. Miss Caldwell has been invaluable in identifying security vulnerabilities. Her reports on individual ranger psychology have been particularly useful. Psychology? Dale asked. Behavioral analysis, Webb explained. How different personality types respond to stress, isolation, and threat. You, for instance, Ranger Henricks, exhibit classic protective leadership traits. You're willing to sacrifice yourself for subordinates, which makes you predictable. He turned to me. And you, Ranger Blackwood, demonstrate the overconfidence typical of recent academy graduates, combined with a desperate need to prove yourself. Also, predictable. This is sick, I said. This is science. Do you have any idea how easy it would be for a terrorist cell to infiltrate park operations? How simple it would be to use these wilderness areas to train operatives or hide weapons caches? Webb gestured around the cabin. We've been operating in this sector for 6 months without detection. We've intercepted radio communications, manipulated search and rescue operations, and taken park personnel hostage, all without triggering any meaningful security response. Because you're using inside knowledge, Dale said. You know our procedures because you used to be one of us. I was never one of you, Webb said with disgust. I was military intelligence assigned to evaluate Park Service capabilities. What I found was a collection of nature lovers playing at being law enforcement officers. He checked his watch. But this phase of the operation is complete. We have all the data we need. So you're letting us go? I asked. Webb and Iris exchanged glances. I'm afraid that's not possible, he said. You've seen too much, know too much about our methods. The operation requires that there be no witnesses. You're going to kill us. I'm going to complete the mission. Nothing personal. He raised his rifle, and I realized that all our running, all our clever tactics had led us exactly where he wanted us, trapped in an isolated cabin with no escape routes. But Dale had been quietly reaching into his jacket, and suddenly he threw something at Webb's feet, a military smoke grenade. The cabin filled with thick, choking smoke. I heard rifle shots, shouting, the crash of furniture being overturned. Dale grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the window. Move, he shouted. We tumbled through the window into the night air, Iris's screams echoing behind us. Whether she was really hurt or just maintaining her cover, I couldn't tell, and didn't care. How did you... I started. Found it in his equipment stash, Dale gasped as we ran. Military surplus, figured it might come in handy. Behind us, the cabin door slammed open and Webb emerged from the smoke, his night vision equipment giving him a clear advantage. Run! Dale shouted, pushing me ahead of him. We crashed through the underbrush, my ankle sending spikes of agony up my leg with every step. Behind us, I could hear Webb pursuing, not running wildly like we were, but moving with professional precision, confident that he would catch us eventually. There! Dale pointed ahead to what looked like a Park Service fire tower rising above the canopy. If we can reach that, we can signal for help. It was at least a quarter-mile away through dense forest, and with my injured ankle, I wasn't sure I could make it, but it was our only chance. We ran through the darkness, branches tearing at our clothes, roots trying to trip us at every step. Behind us, Webb's pursuit was steady and relentless. Halfway to the tower, I stumbled and went down hard. Dale helped me up, but I could see we weren't going to make it. Webb was gaining on us and my ankle couldn't take much more. Leave me, I gasped. Get to the tower, call for help. Not happening. Dale, that's an order. You're not my supervisor anymore, he said grimly. Right now, you're just someone I'm not going to abandon. A rifle shot cracked through the night, the bullet whining past my ear. Webb was close enough to take aimed shots. This is Colonel Marcus Webb to any federal agencies monitoring emergency frequencies. His voice came from somewhere behind us. I have 2 Park Service personnel in custody, and I'm prepared to execute them unless my demands are met. He's bluffing, Dale said. No one's listening. Another shot, closer this time. I want immediate extraction to a non-extradition country and full amnesty for my research activities. You have 30 minutes to respond before I begin eliminating hostages. We reached the base of the fire tower just as dawn was beginning to lighten the eastern sky. The metal ladder stretched up 60 feet to an observation platform equipped with radio equipment. Climb, Dale ordered. I can't. My ankle. You can. 1 rung at a time. I started up the ladder, each movement sending fire through my leg. Below, Dale was providing cover, though he only had his service pistol against Webb's military rifle. I was 20 feet up when Webb emerged from the tree line. Impressive effort, he called up to us, but ultimately futile. That radio equipment won't reach anyone who can help you. He was right. The tower's radio was designed for fire spotting, not emergency communications. Its range was limited to other Park Service stations. But as I climbed higher, something else became visible in the growing daylight. A column of smoke rising from the direction of the main ranger station. Dale, I shouted down. Look east. He followed my gaze and saw the smoke. Jesus Christ, he burned down the station. Webb's laughter echoed up from below. Thorough operational security, Ranger Henricks. Can't have any witnesses or evidence left behind. I reached the observation platform and immediately started working the radio equipment. Most frequencies were still jammed, but emergency channels sometimes used different systems. Mayday, Mayday. This is Olympic National Park. We have multiple federal officers under fire from an armed subject. Request immediate assistance. Static answered me. Any station. This is Ranger Zara Blackwood at the Quinault Fire Tower. We have an active shooter situation and need immediate backup. More static. Below, I could hear Dale and Webb engaged in some kind of standoff. Webb had the superior position and firepower, but Dale had taken cover behind the tower's support structure. It's no use, Webb called up to me. I've been jamming communications all night. No one knows you're in trouble and no one's coming to help. But as the sun rose higher, I began to see something that made my heart race. Aircraft contrails in the distance, moving in our direction. The emergency beacon in Dale's truck. It had been broadcasting all night and someone had finally responded. Dale, I shouted down. Aircraft incoming from the southeast. I saw Webb's head snap around as he spotted the planes. They were military aircraft, helicopters, and what looked like a transport plane. Impossible, he muttered. Then, louder, you're bluffing. But the aircraft were definitely heading our way and getting larger by the minute. Webb's careful composure finally cracked. This wasn't supposed to happen. The operation was contained, controlled. He raised his rifle toward the tower, but before he could fire, Dale shot him. The bullet caught Webb in the shoulder, spinning him around but not dropping him. He staggered, then raised his weapon again. Dale shot him again, this time center mass. Webb went down and didn't get up. I climbed down from the tower as fast as my injured ankle would allow. Dale was kneeling next to Webb, checking for weapons and signs of life. Is he dead? I asked. Yes. Dale's face was grim. I didn't want it to end this way, but he didn't give me a choice. The helicopters were close enough now that we could hear their rotors. Within minutes, the clearing around the fire tower was swarming with federal agents, FBI, military personnel, and what looked like specialized tactical teams. The debriefing took 3 days. We learned that Webb had indeed been conducting unauthorized experiments, not just in Olympic National Park, but in wilderness areas across the country. His research had resulted in the deaths of at least 12 people over the past 2 years. Iris Caldwell was arrested at the cabin site. Her cooperation with Webb had been voluntary, motivated by a combination of money and a twisted belief that his work was necessary for national security. The emergency beacon in Dale's truck had indeed been broadcasting, but it had taken federal authorities nearly 8 hours to triangulate our location and mount a rescue operation. 8 hours during which we were completely on our own against a predator who understood our weaknesses better than we understood them ourselves. I spent 2 weeks on medical leave while my ankle healed, but the psychological injuries took much longer. For months afterward, I jumped at every unexpected radio transmission, every unfamiliar face in the forest. Dale retired 6 months later. He said he'd lost faith in the system's ability to protect its own people. I understood his decision, but I stayed on. Someone had to be there for the next rookie ranger who thought they were ready for anything these woods could throw at them. Because now I know the truth that Webb taught me in the most brutal way possible. The most dangerous predator in any wilderness isn't a bear or a wolf or any other natural creature. It's humans. Specifically, humans who understand that vast wild spaces make perfect hunting grounds for those with the right training and the complete absence of conscience. I still work at Olympic National Park. I'm no longer a rookie. I'm the one who trains the rookies now. And the first thing I teach them is that their greatest threat won't come from the wildlife or the weather. It will come from something that looks just like them, talks just like them, and understands their procedures better than they do. Because Marcus Webb wasn't unique. His files, recovered from the cabin, contained references to other operatives, other research projects, other national parks being used as training grounds for psychological warfare. The federal investigation is ongoing, but bureaucracy moves slowly, and these wilderness areas remain as vulnerable as ever. Sometimes late at night when I'm alone in the ranger station, I wonder if there's another Webb out there somewhere, watching, waiting, studying our weaknesses and planning his own twisted experiments. And sometimes when the radio crackles with static or I hear footsteps that don't quite match the rhythm of wildlife, I remember that terrible night when I learned that the real monsters don't hide in caves or den in the deep woods. They wear uniforms. They know our names, and they're always hunting. The most terrifying thing Marcus Webb taught me wasn't about survival or tactics or wilderness skills. It was that evil doesn't always announce itself with fangs and claws. Sometimes it wears a badge and calls you by your first name. Sometimes it knows exactly how you'll respond to every situation because it's studied you like a laboratory specimen. And sometimes, the most dangerous predator in the forest is the one who used to be on your side. My name is Cassidy Brennan, and I am 27 years old. I've been a park ranger at Olympic National Park for 18 months. This happened during the fall of 2023, when the missing person case of Ezra Hullbrook turned into something that still haunts me. I was still relatively new to the job, eager to prove myself after a childhood spent dreaming of protecting our nation's wild places. The Hoh River Trail was my assigned sector, a stretch of temperate rainforest where ancient Sitka spruces towered over emerald moss, and the river whispered secrets through the fog. I thought I knew every inch of those 12 miles. I was wrong about so many things. October 15th started like any other autumn day. The darkness had begun claiming the forest by 5 p.m., and the temperature had dropped to 38 degrees. I was finishing my evening patrol when dispatch crackled through my radio with news that would change everything. Ranger Brennan, we have a missing person report. Ezra Hullbrook, 34-year-old male, wildlife photographer from Portland. Vehicle located at Hoh River Trailhead. Last contact was yesterday morning, October 14th, approximately 800 hours. I pressed the radio button, feeling that familiar flutter of nervous energy. Missing persons were serious business, and I'd only handled 2 minor cases since starting. Both day hikers who'd simply taken wrong turns and emerged hours later, embarrassed but unharmed. Copy that. What's the search perimeter? I asked. Start with the main trail. Hullbrook's girlfriend says he planned to photograph the maple grove at mile marker 7. She expected him back by evening. The maple grove. I knew it well. A clearing where big-leaf maples created a golden cathedral in autumn, their leaves filtering sunlight into honey-colored beams. It was about a 4-hour round trip for an experienced hiker, but photographers often took longer, waiting for perfect light. 10:04. Beginning search immediately. I should have called for backup then. Protocol suggested it, especially with darkness approaching. But I was 27 and determined to prove I could handle a straightforward search and rescue. The textbooks made it seem simple. Follow the trail, look for signs, maintain radio contact. What they didn't teach was how human evil could turn familiar wilderness into a hunting ground. The trailhead parking lot held only Hullbrook's blue Subaru Outback, looking abandoned under the weak yellow glow of a single security light. I examined it with my flashlight, finding nothing unusual. The doors were locked, windows up, no signs of struggle. Inside, I could see camera equipment cases and a thermos on the passenger seat. I shouldered my pack, radio, GPS, first aid kit, emergency blanket, protein bars, and my service pistol, and headed into the forest. The beam of my mag light carved a narrow tunnel through the increasing darkness, illuminating the well-maintained gravel trail ahead. The Hoh rainforest at night transforms into something primordial. During the day it's magical, cathedral quiet, green and misty, filled with the soft sounds of dripping water and distant bird calls. But after dark, the ancient trees become towering shadows, and every sound gets amplified and distorted. My boots crunched on wet leaves, masking any subtle noises that might indicate where Hullbrook had gone. At mile marker 3, I found the first sign. A red bandana hung from a Douglas fir branch about eye level, tied with a simple overhand knot. It hadn't been there during my morning patrol, I was certain of that. I photographed it with my phone and carefully removed it, noting how fresh it appeared. No weathering, no significant moisture damage. It had to be Hullbrook's. But something felt wrong about its placement. Too convenient, too visible, like it had been positioned specifically to be found. I keyed my radio. Base, this is Brennan. Found possible evidence at mile 3. Red bandana, appears recent. Continuing toward mile 7. Static answered me. Then more static. I adjusted the frequency and tried again. Nothing but electronic snow. The radio had worked perfectly an hour ago. These Motorola units were reliable, and I was nowhere near the dead zones marked on our coverage maps. I tapped the antenna, checked the battery indicator. Everything looked normal. But the silence from dispatch felt suddenly ominous in the vast darkness surrounding me. I continued hiking, telling myself that equipment failure happened and backup would come looking if I didn't check in within 2 hours. That's what the protocol said. But with each step deeper into the forest, my confidence in those protocols began to erode. At mile marker 5, I found Hullbrook's camera, a Canon 5D Mark IV with a telephoto lens, lying beside the trail as if it had been dropped in haste. No case, no strap. The LCD screen was cracked, and when I turned it on, the last photo made my blood run cold. It was a picture of me. Not from today, from sometime last week, judging by the different uniform shirt I was wearing. I was walking along this same trail, but photographed from the forest, through the trees, like someone had been watching me from concealment. The timestamp read, October 8th, 11:47 a.m. My hands started shaking as I scrolled backward through the camera's memory. More photos of me, dozens of them, taken over the past month from various hidden positions. Me checking trail conditions, me talking to hikers, me eating lunch at my favorite fallen log near the river. Someone had been stalking me for weeks, documenting my routines, my patterns. But these weren't Hullbrook's photos. The metadata showed they'd all been taken before he'd even arrived in the area. I was being watched. Right now. The realization hit me like ice water in my veins. This wasn't a missing person case, it was a trap. And I had walked right into it. I spun around, sweeping my flashlight beam through the trees, but saw only shadows and moss-covered trunks stretching endlessly in every direction. The forest that had felt like home now felt like a maze designed to confuse and disorient me. My radio crackled suddenly to life. Having fun yet, Ranger Brennan? The voice was unfamiliar, male, calm, with a slight rasp that suggested years of smoking. Definitely not dispatch. Someone was using our frequency. "Who is this? Where's Ezra Hullbrook?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Low chuckle. Ezra's safe. For now. He's playing his part in our little game. Game? You've been walking my trails for 18 months, little ranger. Thinking you own the place, thinking your uniform and your training make you something special. Time to find out what you're really made of. The transmission cut to static. I was alone in the darkness with someone who knew me, had been watching me, and had somehow lured a photographer into the forest as bait. Someone with access to park radio frequencies and intimate knowledge of my patrol routes. My training told me to retreat, call for backup, establish a perimeter. But my radio was compromised, and something about the voice triggered a memory I couldn't quite place. I'd heard it before, somewhere in the park service. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I continued toward mile marker 7. Hullbrook was out there, and if there was any chance he was still alive, I couldn't abandon him, even if it meant walking deeper into whatever twisted scenario had been prepared for me. The maple grove appeared in my flashlight beam like a stage set arranged for a performance I didn't want to give. The golden leaves that had been so beautiful in daylight now looked sickly yellow under artificial light, and they rustled with an unnatural sound, too dry, too brittle for the damp climate. In the center of the clearing sat a camp chair. Hullbrook was bound to it with climbing rope, his head slumped forward, a strip of duct tape across his mouth. He was conscious. I could see his chest rising and falling, but his eyes were wide with terror above the tape. I approached carefully, sweeping my light across the surrounding trees. This felt like an obvious trap, but I couldn't leave him there. Ezra, I'm Ranger Brennan. I'm here to get you out. He shook his head frantically, making muffled sounds behind the tape. His eyes darted toward the forest behind me, warning me of something I couldn't see. I was reaching for my knife to cut his restraints when the voice spoke from somewhere in the darkness beyond my flashlight beam. Textbook approach, Brennan, just like they taught you at the academy. Secure the victim first, establish communication, assess for injuries. Very professional. I spun toward the sound, drawing my service pistol in one fluid motion. The Glock felt solid and reassuring in my hands, even though I'd never fired it outside of qualifying exercises. Show yourself. This is over. Is it? The voice seemed to move, coming from a different location now. You found your missing photographer in less than 3 hours. Pretty impressive for someone with only 18 months experience. Of course, I made it easy for you. Breadcrumbs leading right where I wanted you to go. I kept my weapon raised, trying to track the voice while maintaining visual contact with Hullbrook. He was struggling against his bonds, rocking the chair slightly. Who are you? What do you want? Name's Marcus Ventura. Ring any bells? It did. Marcus Ventura had been a ranger here at Olympic, dismissed 3 years ago for excessive force during visitor encounters. I'd heard the stories, how he'd become increasingly aggressive with hikers who violated park rules, how he'd started viewing the forest as his personal domain that needed to be protected from human intrusion. The final incident involved a family with young children whom he'd detained at gunpoint for camping in a restricted area. You were fired, I said. Terminated, he corrected. Cast out of paradise for doing my job too well. Protecting these woods from people who don't deserve them. People like your friend there, who came trampling through my territory with his cameras and his entitled city boy attitude. These aren't your woods, Ventura. You lost the right to... Lost the right? His laugh was sharp and bitter. I've lived in these forests for 3 years. 3 years without leaving, not once. I know every game trail, every water source, every cave and hidden valley. I've earned these woods with sweat and blood and sacrifice. You've been here 18 months and you think you understand this place? A branch snapped somewhere to my left. I pivoted toward the sound, but my flashlight revealed only empty forest. Here's what's going to happen, Ventura continued, his voice now coming from yet another direction. I'm going to give you a sporting chance. More than you deserve, really, but I'm feeling generous. You have until sunrise to get your photographer friend out of my territory. 6 hours. Make it to the parking lot and you both walk away. And if we don't? Then you become permanent residents, like the others. Others. Jesus Christ, how many people had he killed? Of course, it won't be easy, he went on. These woods can be dangerous at night, easy to get lost. Easy to have accidents, and I'll be watching every step you take just like I have been for weeks. I heard Hullbrook make another muffled sound behind me. When I glanced back, he was staring at something on the ground near his chair. Following his gaze with my flashlight beam, I saw fresh blood in the fallen leaves. Not much, but enough to indicate someone had been injured recently. First blood's already been drawn, Ventura said, reading my discovery. Your photographer tried to run when I first brought him here. Bad choice. Now he's got a nice gash on his leg that's going to slow you down considerably. I moved closer to Hullbrook and began cutting his restraints with my tactical knife. The rope fell away easily, too easily. He'd wanted me to free Hullbrook. This was all part of whatever sick game he had planned. As soon as his hands were free, Hullbrook ripped the tape from his mouth and gasped, "It's a trap. He's been living out here. He knows every—" "Shut up," I hissed, helping him to his feet. Hullbrook's left leg was indeed injured, a long cut along his calf that had soaked his hiking pants with blood. He could walk, but not quickly, and certainly not quietly. "Can you make it back to the trailhead?" I whispered. "I don't know. Maybe. But he's right about knowing these woods. I tried to escape twice, and both times he was waiting for me like he knew exactly where I'd go." My radio crackled again. "Time starts now, Rangers. 6 hours until sunrise. Try not to disappoint me." I looked at my watch. 11:17 p.m. Sunrise would come around 5:30 a.m. 7 miles back to the parking lot with an injured civilian, through forest controlled by someone with military training and 3 years of survival experience. We started walking. The return journey became a nightmare of paranoia and exhaustion. Every shadow could conceal Ventura. Every sound, and there were many, might signal an attack. Hullbrook limped beside me, trying to stay quiet despite his pain, while I swept my flashlight beam constantly through the surrounding trees. After 30 minutes, we'd covered maybe half a mile. At this pace, we'd never make it to the trailhead by sunrise. "We need to move faster," I told Hullbrook. "I'm trying. This leg is pretty torn up." "Let me take a look." I knelt and examined his wound by flashlight. It was deep, but clean, probably from a hunting knife. Ventura knew exactly how to disable someone without causing life-threatening injury. This was about the hunt, not quick killing. I bandaged the cut with supplies from my first aid kit and gave Hullbrook 2 ibuprofen tablets. "That'll help with the pain and swelling," I said. "But we really need to—" A stick broke somewhere behind us. We both froze, listening. The forest had gone completely silent. No wind, no dripping water, no animal sounds. Even the river seemed muted and distant. "He's following us," Hullbrook whispered. "I know." "What do we do?" Good question. My training covered search and rescue, basic first aid, dealing with problem wildlife, and maintaining park facilities. Nothing about being hunted by a rogue ex-ranger through dark forest. "We keep moving," I decided, "but we change tactics." "What do you mean?" "The trail is too predictable. He knows we have to follow it to get back to the parking lot. But there are game trails, old logging roads. If we can get off the main path—" "Won't we get lost?" "Probably." My GPS was acting strangely. The screen kept flickering, and the satellite signal seemed weak despite the clear sky above the canopy. But staying on the main trail was guaranteed to lead us into whatever ambush Ventura had prepared. "Trust me," I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. We left the established trail at mile marker 4, following a narrow deer path that led roughly northeast toward the parking area. The going was immediately harder. Branches caught at our clothes, roots waited to trip us in the darkness, and the path twisted unpredictably through the underbrush. But for the first time since finding Hullbrook, I felt like we might have a chance. Ventura expected us to follow the main trail like frightened sheep. By choosing our own route, we'd gained some small element of surprise. That feeling lasted exactly 12 minutes. "Welcome to the scenic route," Ventura's voice echoed through the trees around us. He was close enough that I could hear him breathing somewhere in the darkness beyond my flashlight's reach. Did you really think I wouldn't know every game trail, every deer path, every possible route through these woods? I've been watching you walk this forest for 18 months. I know how you think, how you move, what choices you make under pressure. Hullbrook grabbed my arm. He's playing with us, he whispered. I know. He could have killed us already if he wanted to. I knew that too. Ventura had military training, probably special forces, given his woodcraft skills and psychological approach. If he'd wanted us dead, we'd already be corpses. This was about something else, power, control, the thrill of the hunt. Tell me, Brennan, his disembodied voice continued, how does it feel to be the prey? You spend your days hiking these trails with your shiny badge and your authority, telling people where they can and can't go. Now you're running through my forest like a scared rabbit. These aren't your woods, I shouted into the darkness. You're a disgraced ex-employee who's been hiding in the forest like a coward. Silence. Then a low, dangerous chuckle. Coward? I've survived 3 winters in this wilderness without any outside help. I've learned to live as part of the forest, not just a visitor with a uniform. You couldn't last 3 days out here without your radio and your GPS and your safety protocols. A pine cone hit the tree next to my head. But you're about to find out. Something moved in the underbrush to our left. I spun toward it, raising my pistol, but saw only swaying branches that might have been disturbed by wind, or by someone who knew exactly how to move through the forest without being seen. We need to run, I told Hullbrook. I can't. My leg. You have to. I grabbed his arm and we stumbled forward along the barely visible game trail. Branches whipped at our faces, roots caught our feet, and behind us I could hear the methodical sounds of someone following at a measured pace. Not running, not hurrying, just maintaining steady pursuit like a predator who knew his prey would eventually tire. The trail led us deeper into the forest, winding through areas I'd never seen during my official patrols. Ancient cedars rose like cathedral pillars around us, their bases disappearing into tangles of fern and salmonberry. Everything looked alien in the limited circle of my flashlight beam. After 20 minutes of stumbling progress, we emerged into a small clearing where moonlight filtered down through a gap in the canopy. I checked my GPS again, but the screen showed only static and error messages. The signal's being jammed, I realized. What? GPS jamming equipment, military grade. He's not just living out here. He's got technology. Which meant Ventura had planned this scenario carefully. The radio interference, the GPS disruption, the psychological warfare, all of it coordinated to strip away my technological advantages and force me to survive on instinct alone. Instinct I didn't have. Not yet. 18 months wasn't enough time to develop the deep wilderness sense that came with years of experience. So what now? Hullbrook asked, slumping against a fallen log. I looked at my watch, 1:43 a.m., 3 hours and 47 minutes until sunrise, still 4 miles from the parking lot, assuming we could find our way without GPS. Now we stop playing his game, I decided. What do you mean? He's hurting us, controlling our route, our choices, our timing. As long as we keep running, we're just following his script. So what do we do? I thought about everything I'd learned in the past 18 months. Not just the official training, but the informal knowledge passed down from older rangers. The stories about problem wildlife, dangerous weather, and the occasional human threat. One story in particular came back to me. Tom Fletcher, a 20-year veteran, had once told me about a poacher who'd been operating in the park illegally for months. The guy knew the terrain, had military training, and seemed untouchable. But Tom had caught him using one simple tactic: patience. We wait, I said. Wait for what? For him to make a mistake. Ventura was human, which meant he had human limitations. He'd been awake all night, just like us. He was older, probably in his 40s by now, and despite his survival skills, he was still operating on adrenaline and caffeine. Eventually, he'd get tired. Eventually, he'd get overconfident. He expects us to keep running until we're exhausted and make fatal errors, I explained quietly. Instead, we're going to find a defensive position and force him to come to us. With what weapons? You've got a pistol. He probably has rifles, knives, who knows what else. He's got better weapons, I agreed. But I've got something he doesn't. What's that? Backup that's going to come looking when I miss my check-in. It was 2:15 a.m. when we found the perfect spot. A small depression surrounded by fallen logs and thick undergrowth. Good sight lines in 3 directions, solid cover from the 4th. We settled in to wait. Hullbrook wrapped himself in my emergency blanket while I kept watch, scanning the forest through my night vision scope. The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant sound of the Ho River and occasional rustling that could have been wind or small animals, or Ventura moving through the underbrush. "Tell me about him," Hullbrook whispered. "This Ventura guy." "Former Army Ranger, according to his personnel file. Joined the Park Service after his military discharge. Worked here for 5 years before the incidents started." Incidents? Excessive force with park visitors. Started with verbal confrontations, escalated to physical detention. The final straw was when he held a family at gunpoint for camping in a restricted area. Jesus. Administration said he'd developed an obsessive attachment to the wilderness areas he patrolled. Began seeing himself as their protector against human intrusion. Sounds like he snapped. Maybe. Or maybe he just showed his true nature. Some people aren't meant for civilization. My radio hissed softly with static, then cleared momentarily. "Anner, this is base. Report your status." The transmission cut off before I could respond, but it was enough. Backup was trying to reach me. When I failed to respond, they'd send search teams. "Did you hear that?" I whispered to Hullbrook. He nodded. "How long before they come looking?" "Protocol says 6 hours from last contact. That gives us until sunrise." Exactly what Ventura had promised. He knew our procedures as well as I did. A branch snapped somewhere in the darkness ahead of us. I raised my pistol, finger on the trigger, and waited. Moonlight filtered through the canopy in shifting patterns that made every shadow seem alive with movement. Another sound, closer this time. Footsteps in dead leaves, trying to be quiet, but not quite succeeding. "I know you're out there," Ventura's voice called softly. "Hold up like scared animals. This isn't how the game is supposed to be played." I kept silent, tracking the sound of his voice as it moved through the trees around our position. "You're supposed to run, Brennan. Keep running until you drop from exhaustion, and I can end this properly. By stopping, you're ruining the whole experience." He was circling us, staying just outside my effective range with the pistol, testing our position, looking for weaknesses. "I've got all night," he continued, "all the time in the world, but your photographer friend is bleeding, and blood loss makes people do stupid things." I glanced at Hullbrook. He was pale but alert, clutching a thick branch he'd found as an improvised weapon. "You know what I did to the last hiker who tried to hide from me?" Ventura's voice had moved again, coming from a different direction. "Found him in a cave up near Salduke Falls. Thought he was so clever waiting for rescue. But hunger makes people desperate." The psychological warfare was deliberate and calculated. He wanted us afraid, wanted us to break discipline and make mistakes. 3 days, he went on. 3 days before he got thirsty enough to leave his hiding spot. I was waiting, of course. Been watching the cave entrance the whole time. I forced myself to ignore the taunts and focus on tactical considerations. Ventura was revealing information about his methods, his psychology, his preferred hunting grounds. All useful intelligence if I lived long enough to use it. "That's when I realized the truth about people like you," his voice continued, now coming from behind us. "You're not protectors of the wilderness. You're just tourists with badges playing at being outdoorsmen until real hardship tests what you're made of." The accusation stung because it contained enough truth to be painful. I was young, inexperienced, and way out of my depth. Everything I knew about wilderness survival came from textbooks and training exercises, not years of actual experience. But I was also armed, determined, and responsible for an innocent man's life. "Tell me about the others," I called into the darkness. Silence. "You said there were others. How many people have you killed?" More silence. Then, "None of them were killed. They all chose their fate." "What does that mean?" "The wilderness doesn't kill people, Brennan. People kill themselves by making poor choices. Wrong turns, bad weather preparation, panic decisions. I just accelerate the natural selection process. A chill ran down my spine. He wasn't just a killer. He was a predator who'd convinced himself he was performing some kind of ecological service. The weak get culled, he continued. The strong adapt and survive. It's the most natural thing in the world. You're insane. Am I? Or am I the only one honest enough to acknowledge what these forests really are? Not some theme park for weekend warriors with GPS units and credit cards. This is a place where the old rules still apply. Strength matters, intelligence matters, experience matters. A stick cracked directly behind our position. I spun around, raising my weapon, but saw nothing except dark trees and shifting shadows. 18 months, Ventura whispered from somewhere very close. 18 months of watching you stumble through my territory like a lost child. This is where you find out if you belong here. The attack came from the left. A dark shape burst through the undergrowth, moving fast and low. I fired twice, the muzzle flashes strobing through the forest, but he was already rolling behind a fallen cedar before I could acquire a proper target. "Run!" I shouted to Hullbrook. He scrambled up from behind our log barricade and limped toward the tree line while I provided covering fire. 2 more shots at moving shadows, then the hammer fell on an empty chamber. I fumbled for my spare magazine, hands shaking from adrenaline, and realized Ventura had forced exactly the situation he wanted: panic, separation, and wasted ammunition. By the time I'd reloaded, both he and Hullbrook had disappeared into the forest. "Hullbrook," I called. No answer except the echo of my own voice bouncing off the trees. I was alone in the darkness with a trained killer who knew these woods better than I knew my own apartment. My radio crackled. "Not bad shooting for someone who's only fired her weapon on a practice range, but you missed." "Where's Hullbrook?" "Safe, for now." "This is between you and me, Brennan." "It was always between you and me." I started moving through the forest, following the rough direction Hullbrook had taken when he fled. My flashlight beam swept across ferns and fallen logs, looking for blood or broken branches or any sign of where he'd gone. "You want to know the difference between us?" Ventura's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "You see this forest as a place to protect. I see it as a place that protects itself. You impose human rules on a wilderness that doesn't recognize human authority." I found a scrap of cloth caught on a blackberry bush, torn from Hullbrook's jacket. The trail led deeper into the forest, away from anything resembling a path back to civilization. 3 years ago, you people cast me out for doing my job too well. Said I was excessive, unstable, a liability to public safety. But who's the liability now? Who's stumbling through the dark, lost and confused and completely out of their depth? Following the trail of broken vegetation and disturbed earth, I realized Ventura was hurting me again. He'd taken Hullbrook to draw me into terrain of his choosing, where he'd have every advantage. But I didn't have a choice. I couldn't abandon Hullbrook to save myself. The trail led to a ravine cut by a small stream. At the bottom, I found Hullbrook sitting against a boulder, with his hands zip-tied behind his back. He was conscious, but looked dazed, possibly concussed. "It's another trap," he said as I approached. "I know." I cut his restraints and helped him to his feet. The ravine was maybe 20 feet deep with steep sides that would be difficult to climb, especially in darkness. There was only one way out, following the stream back toward the main river. "He wants us to go that way," Hullbrook pointed downstream. "Probably, but what choice do we have?" We started walking along the rocky stream bed, using my flashlight to navigate between boulders and fallen trees. The going was slow and treacherous, with loose rocks that could turn an ankle and hidden holes that could trap a foot. After 10 minutes, we heard the sound of moving water growing louder ahead. The stream was leading us toward a larger body of water, probably the Hoh River itself. "Almost there," Ventura called from somewhere above us on the ravine walls. "Just a little farther." The stream emerged into a wider channel where it joined the Hoh River proper. The sound of rushing water was much louder here, and I could see white foam where the current ran over submerged rocks. In the middle of the river, A fallen tree created a natural bridge to the far shore. "Cross the log," Ventura's voice commanded. "Both of you." "It's too dangerous," I shouted back. "The water's moving too fast. Cross it, or I start shooting." To emphasize his point, a rifle bullet chipped bark from a tree beside my head. I examined the fallen cedar with my flashlight. It was maybe 18 inches in diameter and stretched 40 feet across the river. The bark looked wet and slippery, and the current underneath was strong enough to be fatal if either of us fell. "I can't do it," Hullbrook said, "not with this leg." "You have to." "I'll fall." Another rifle shot, closer this time. "Move." I pushed Hullbrook toward the log. He climbed onto the fallen tree and started across, arms extended for balance, moving inches at a time. I followed close behind, ready to grab him if he slipped. Halfway across, Hullbrook's injured leg buckled. He windmilled his arms, fighting for balance, and I lunged forward to catch him. For a terrifying moment, we both teetered over the rushing water, then managed to stabilize against each other. "Keep going," I urged. We made it to the far shore just as my watch showed 4:15 a.m. 1 hour and 15 minutes until sunrise. We'd covered maybe 3 miles from our starting point, but I had no idea where we were in relation to the parking lot. "Well done," Ventura called from across the river. "Very athletic. Now the real fun begins." I looked around and realized why he'd forced us to cross. This side of the river was unfamiliar territory, an area I'd never patrolled, with no established trails back to civilization. We were deeper in the wilderness than ever, farther from help, and completely dependent on finding our own way out. You see, Brennan, true wilderness survival isn't about following marked trails with your GPS and your guidebooks. It's about reading the land, understanding the patterns, thinking like the animals that live here. Hullbrook was shivering, whether from cold or shock I couldn't tell. His injured leg was bleeding again, leaving a trail that would be easy to follow. 1 hour until sunrise? Ventura continued. Think you can find your way back to safety before then? I looked at the dark forest stretching endlessly in every direction. Without GPS or familiar landmarks, navigation would be guesswork. With an injured civilian slowing me down, even guesswork would be difficult. But we were still alive, and backup would be coming soon. I just had to keep us breathing until professional search teams could take over. This way, I told Hullbrook, choosing a direction that felt roughly correct. We pushed through dense underbrush for 30 minutes, following game trails when we could find them, bushwhacking when we couldn't. My flashlight battery was getting weaker, the beam growing dimmer with each passing minute. At 4:50 a.m., we stumbled into a small clearing where I recognized something, a distinctive rock formation that marked the boundary between patrol sectors. I knew where we were. The parking lot was less than 2 miles northeast, following a maintenance road that connected to the main trail system. We could make it before full sunrise if we hurried. Come on, I urged Hullbrook. We're almost there. But as we started across the clearing, Ventura stepped out of the trees directly ahead of us. He was exactly what I'd expected. Mid-40s, lean and weathered, dressed in military surplus camouflage. He carried a scoped hunting rifle with casual confidence, like it was a natural extension of his body. End of the line, he said calmly. I raised my pistol, but he just smiled. 9mm Glock versus .308 Winchester at 40 yards. Want to do the math on that engagement? He was right. At this distance, with his rifle scope and superior marksmanship training, I had no chance in a straight gunfight. What do you want? I asked. Want? I want you to understand something important before this ends. You think your badge makes you qualified to protect this wilderness. You think 18 months of ranger training makes you belong here. But look at yourself. Lost, exhausted, completely dependent on technology that failed the moment things got serious. He gestured with his rifle toward the forest around us. This is what real wilderness looks like. Not some hiking trail with interpretive signs and emergency phones. This is where the old rules apply. Strength, intelligence, adaptability. Everything your modern civilization has forgotten. You're insane, I said. Am I? Or am I the only one sane enough to recognize what this place really is? You spent 18 months walking through my territory like a tourist, thinking your uniform gave you authority over something that existed long before humans invented governments and badges. He took a step closer, rifle still aimed at my chest. But you've learned something tonight, haven't you? You've felt what it's like to be prey, to have your technology fail, your training prove inadequate, your confidence stripped away layer by layer until there's nothing left but animal fear. Behind me, Hullbrook whimpered softly. His leg was giving out, blood loss and exhaustion finally taking their toll. Here's what's going to happen, Ventura continued. You're going to put down your weapon and walk back into the forest with me. Your photographer friend can try to find his way back to the parking lot. Maybe he'll make it, maybe he won't. Natural selection in action. And if I refuse? Then I kill you both right here and arrange the scene to look like a tragic accident. Lost hikers, fell into the river, bodies never recovered. Happens more often than you'd think. I kept my pistol trained on him, knowing it was useless but refusing to surrender. My mind raced through options, tactics, anything that might give us a chance. Then I heard it. The distant sound of helicopter rotors. Search and rescue. They'd finally come looking. Ventura heard it too. His expression shifted from calm confidence to something harder, more desperate. You called them earlier than I calculated, he said. Emergency protocol. When Rangers miss check-ins, backup responds automatically. The helicopter sound was getting closer, probably following the river system as they searched for my signal. Doesn't matter, Ventura decided. I can be gone before they land. Vanished back into wilderness they'll never find, but first... He swung the rifle toward Hullbrook. I fired 3 times as fast as I could pull the trigger. The first shot missed. The second caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. The third hit center mass, dropping him to the forest floor. Ventura lay still for a moment, breathing heavily, blood spreading across his camouflage jacket. Then he started laughing, a wet, raspy sound that echoed through the clearing. Natural selection, he wheezed. Strongest survives. Stay down, I ordered, keeping my weapon aimed at him. 3 years, he said, struggling to sit up against a tree. 3 years I've been the apex predator in these woods. And you? 18 months of training. You think you've won? The helicopter was directly overhead now, searchlight cutting through the canopy. I could hear voices, radio chatter, the sound of rescue teams mobilizing. I haven't won anything, I told him. I just survived. Ventura smiled, blood on his teeth. Check your watch. I glanced down. 5:28 a.m. 2 minutes until sunrise. Game over, he whispered. Then he pressed something in his hand. A small electronic device I hadn't noticed before. Somewhere in the distance I heard a muffled explosion. My blood turned to ice. What did you do? Trail bridge at mile marker 2, he said. Rigged with explosives 3 days ago. Your rescue teams will have to take the long way around now. Add at least 2 hours to their response time. The helicopter circled overhead, but I could hear the pilot's frustrated radio calls as he reported the destroyed bridge blocking ground access to our location. Ventura was still smiling. You think this ends here? You think killing me solves anything? I've been living wild in these forests for 3 years. I know places your maps don't show, caves your surveys never found. Even if I die here, there are others like me out there. People who've chosen to leave civilization behind, who see these wilderness areas as hunting grounds. You're lying. Am I? How many missing persons cases have you worked since you started? How many people who just disappeared without a trace? I thought about the statistics, the cold case files, the hikers who'd vanished over the years. Some of them attributed to accidents, getting lost, falling into rivers or off cliffs. But others, the network is bigger than you think. Ventura continued, his voice getting weaker. Ex-military, survivalists, people who've rejected everything soft and weak about modern society. We communicate through dead drops, amateur radio, coded messages in online forums. We'll find them. Will you? With your 18 months of experience, your textbook knowledge, your faith in technology and procedures? He coughed, spattering blood on his jacket. You survived tonight through luck, not skill, Because I wanted the hunt to last longer, wanted to savor the fear. A real predator would have killed you in the first 10 minutes. The helicopter was setting down in a clearing half a mile away, as close as they could get with the bridge destroyed. I could hear ground teams crashing through the underbrush toward our location. "Remember this night," Ventura said as his eyes started to lose focus. "Remember how helpless you felt, how out of your depth, because there are others out there and they're watching, learning, planning. Rangers, federal agents, identify yourselves." The rescue team burst into the clearing with weapons drawn, tactical lights sweeping the area. I raised my hands, keeping my pistol pointed safely away. "Ranger Cassidy Brennan, I have an injured civilian and one hostile down." The team leader, a grizzled sergeant I recognized from joint training exercises, assessed the situation quickly and efficiently. Medical personnel immediately went to work on Hullbrook while others secured Ventura's body and established a perimeter. "What happened here, Ranger?" the sergeant asked. I gave him a concise briefing while the medics worked. Missing photographer, evidence of stalking, pursuit through the forest, final confrontation. I left out most of the psychological warfare and focused on facts that would make sense in an official report. But as they loaded Hullbrook into a medical helicopter and began processing the crime scene, Ventura's words kept echoing in my mind. The network. Others like him. People who'd chosen to become predators in the wilderness areas I was sworn to protect. 2 weeks later, I was back on patrol, but everything had changed. Every shadow in the forest might conceal a watcher. Every missing person case might be more than simple accident or misadventure. Every routine hike became an exercise in paranoia. The investigation into Ventura's activities uncovered evidence of at least 4 other disappearances over the past 3 years, cases that had been classified as accidental deaths or people who'd simply vanished. His campsite, finally located in a hidden cave system near Solduke Falls, contained detailed surveillance photos of dozens of park visitors and staff, including me. He'd been watching, learning, selecting targets for months before I ever saw that first red bandana on the trail. But the thing that haunts me most wasn't the evidence of his crimes. It was the radio equipment we found in his cave, military-grade communication gear tuned to frequencies used by other survival networks across the Pacific Northwest. Equipment that suggested he'd been in contact with others, sharing information, coordinating activities. The network was real. 3 months after that night, I was assigned to a joint task force investigating suspicious disappearances in wilderness areas across Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. The pattern was always the same: experienced hikers or campers who vanished without a trace, leaving behind abandoned vehicles and no evidence of accident or foul play. Most of them were never found. But sometimes in remote areas of national forests, we'd discover campsites that showed signs of long-term habitation, hidden locations where someone had been living off the grid for months or years, watching the trails, studying the patterns of legitimate wilderness users. And occasionally we'd find the surveillance photos. Pictures of rangers, hikers, families on camping trips, all taken from concealment, all documenting the routines and habits of potential prey. The subjects were always unaware they were being watched, photographed, cataloged. I've learned to recognize the signs now. The feeling of being observed, the small inconsistencies that suggest human manipulation rather than natural wilderness conditions, the electronic interference that indicates jamming equipment nearby. But knowledge doesn't make the fear go away. Every time I patrol the Hoh River Trail, and I still patrol it because someone has to, I remember that night when I learned the most dangerous predator in any wilderness is another human being. And sometimes when the shadows are deep and the forest is too quiet, I wonder if Marcus Ventura was right about one thing. Maybe 18 months of training really isn't enough to survive what's out there waiting in the darkness between the trees. Last week we found another surveillance photo. This one was taken 3 days ago, showing me walking the same trail where it all started. The timestamp indicates it was shot at 11:47 a.m., exactly the same time as that first photo in Hullbrook's camera. Someone is still watching. Someone is still hunting. And I'm still walking through their territory wearing my ranger uniform like a target. knowing that the next missing person case might be my own. The forest remembers everything, but some memories are written in blood, and those never fade.